with this, I will get started. So, yeah, before anything, and I will start the way I do. I'll just simplify this entire stuff for you guys. Okay, so what is Agile? Okay, now you both remember in your engineering, you had this subject called software engineering, where you had this, what do you say, probably a dedicated module or a chapter related to SDLC, which is nothing but software development life cycle. Not sure how many of you took it seriously because it was pure theory one. Okay. So there is this thing called SDLC. Are you aware of it?
Yes.
Cool. So see, there are basically six phases. Okay, I'll first write them down. So it starts obviously with requirements analysis. And what are we discussing by the way right now? We are first trying to understand what is SDLC, and then we'll take a look at Agile, Scrum, Lean, Kanban, etc., waterfall, and whatever. So the first phase is any software lifecycle development lifecycle is your requirements analysis, where you collect the requirements as in what you want to build. Okay. The second thing after you've collected the requirements, can you help me with the second one? It's called analysis and design. Okay, where you are trying to analyze what are the requirements and then let's say design. Okay, or you can just to simplify it further, you can just write design phase. Even that works. Now, the third thing, uh, pri primarily what you guys are here for, development. Then comes obviously testing. After you test the software, you have to deliver it, right? Let's say delivery. And then the last one is maintenance. Is there any mistake in this? In
No, I
case,
don't think so.
okay, instead of delivery, it is deployment by the way. That's a better word. Okay.
Oh,
So now see, these six are the primary phases of a software development. So let's say now I will take an example and I'll explain it to you. Let's say you have ICICI Bank, for example, or HDFC Bank, and let's go back to 1990s, early 1990s. They wanted to digitize the entire banking system, for an example. So they go to a company called Fractal, for example, and then they say, hey, I really want to digitize all of this, the customers' data, etc., and everything. I want to automate the entire process of payments, our analytics, how many customers, the transactions. We want to build a simple analytics, let's say a one-stop analytics shop for the entire bank, right? So all such sort of things. We want to make sure that the documents are also present and accessible in a digital format and so on and so forth. They say we want to build a product. We want you to build a product. Now what does Fractal do? Fractal would obviously first collect the requirements from them, then design a solution, then start developing it, then they would test, then they would deploy it. Deploy is basically, here deployment means making it accessible to the HDFC people. And then from then onwards, as and when issues come, Fractal would try solving. Who's gonna raise the issues? Obviously, HDFC Bank employees, etc. And then people from Fractal would just try to maintain the software, right? This entire thing can happen in two ways. And the first way, which used to happen decades, let's say about 1.5 decade ago or something, let's say 2 decades ago, was the waterfall model. This is basically one way of building a software. Now, what does the waterfall model say? The waterfall model basically says that 1995, let's say 1st January, HDFC Bank submits a requirement sheet. This is what we want. Then Fractal would say, we are giving you a timeline of 1 year. So 1st January 1996, Fractal has to deliver the fifth phase. Now, as a company, what Fractal and its employees would do, knowing that HDFC people are not technical and they have zero clue about how the IT ecosystem works, They would say we would build the software in 1 year, out of which first 6 months they'll all chill. Next 3 months, let's say they hire lakhs of people. I mean, probably lakhs is a bigger number. Let's say 10, 15,000 or 50,000 people. Within 3 months, finish the entire development. Just giving you an example. By the way, real products were earlier built in 4 years, 5 years or plus. So first 6 months they chill. 3 months, what do? They build the product. Another 1 or 2 months they spend in and around testing. And then finally, in the month of December, they just deploy the product. They give it to Fractal. Now, they give it to HDFC. Now, let's write down the drawbacks of this. The first drawback, what do you think? Mhm.
Yes, by the time it's deployed, it's already like extended. Like the requirement is already not meeting or something like that.
Exactly. One thing is, in
Yeah,
that 1 year,
outdated.
a lot of things changed, so the requirements became outdated. That's the first thing. Next thing, in the middle, let's say in July 1995, if HDFC comes and says, hey, we want a small change, Fractal would strictly say a no. Why? Because waterfall model does not allow any change. It usually works for a monolithic application. Okay, so in monolithic, there's one standalone application for which during the deployment phase nobody can use it. This is one problem. Okay, so let's say an outcome of your monolithic application is that there's huge amount of downtime. So when the deployment etc is going on, you cannot use that system. Apart from that, it's less flexible, as I said, not open to changes. Okay, these were, let's say, some of the problems. Apart from that, one thing which is very critical and you must understand this is transparency is missing here. Now, why do I say transparency? Because if Fractal wanted, they could have delivered the entire stuff in 6 months, but they overbilled the client to some extent. Yes, they did. They actually gave higher estimates. So these kind of things are normal in the IT setup, but still, there's a threshold to it, right? So there's less amount of transparency, and because of all this, at times the quality of the product was also compromised. These are some of the drawbacks of waterfall model. And by the way, what is happening in waterfall model? I would repeat, each phase of the waterfall model is an input to the next phase. Unless the requirement analysis is done, nobody can start designing. Unless the design is complete, you cannot start development. And unless the development is done, you need not even hire testing guys. And then after the testing is done, or usually after development, you onboard the deployment or operations team. Okay, and then after the deployment, you start maintaining. Okay, so no bug would come to you. That means no issues can be raised before deployment. Yes. So
Right, sir.
with exactly. So with all of this, now there were so many challenges, and I really want you to focus with one thing on one thing here, which was a key driver to bringing in Agile, and that was the less amount of flexibility. Why I say that? Because as times changed, as we shifted to cloud and we shifted to a lot of digitization across countries where we, came across data revolution, etc., the internet revolution, people consuming more, everything getting digitized. What exactly started happening was the demand for softwares started increasing, and it went on at a crazy level. Let's say late 2000s or early 2010, it skyrocketed, and you cannot, okay, I repeat, you cannot sustain with such a model with increasing demands, right? So people wanted something more flexible, they wanted something more transparent, they wanted something, their deliverables to be of better quality. They also wanted less downtime, and people also were talking about microservices. Yes, they wanted to accommodate changes more frequently. So solving all of these, what was brought in was Agile. Now, what is Agile? Agile is nothing but a practice. Okay. let's say a practice or a set of rules or regulations or guidelines that one needs to follow in the process of software development to make things easier. Okay, definitely for the good. So what is this agile practice all about? This entire series of steps remains the same, but they go in parallel now. Okay, so let's look at this diagram. This diagram basically, again, this is just explaining you the six phases, as I said: analysis, and then your design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. Now, if I close this and let's say I go to SDLC Agile, or let's say Agile versus model waterfall. So just look at this. What's happening here is it used to go step by step. Here, what is happening is things are just going in parallel. Okay. So that basically means you can break down systems. Okay. You see this one is a let's say step by step thing, and the other one is a cyclic thing. If you notice here, this one is kind of a cycle, right? Wherein new requirements keep coming in as backlog. You keep analyzing, defining, designing, testing, and deploying, and this entire thing keeps on happening. Now, how do you do that? You do that by breaking down the entire application into different modules, which is also something which is today called as microservices. Yes, this is what is a microservice. To give you an example, for example, let me open LinkedIn. You have a lot of sections here: my network, jobs, messaging, notifications, etc. Let's say learning. Now, somebody who's not able to open LinkedIn Learning should still be able to use the application in general. Yes. Is that a better architecture, or the entire LinkedIn should go down immediately with all its features? Or you can still use LinkedIn without messaging? What do you prefer as a consumer?
Yeah, it should work without the other features. Like the
Yeah,
main system should load.
exactly. At least one or two of the minor features are not working. That's absolutely fine. But still, the entire application should work, right? So with this kind of thing, how do you build such a thing? You divide these individual sections into microservices. So let's say your backend is for notifications is written in Java, and for example, your jobs thing is written in .NET. So even if the Java stuff is down, the .NET one is up and running. They two are purely independent of each other because the backend technology is different. And even if the technology is same, they are hosted in two different places. So their availability is independent of each other. And in that sort of a this sort of a setup is basically called microservices, where the APIs of one section is available and it supports the application while one or two of them might be down at times. Okay. Now that you know this, let's look at what agile is basically. So you have to know some keywords when it comes to agile. And coming back to the HDFC example, now I am a smart CEO of HDFC, so I am a bit more aware of the software terminologies, etc. And I am talking to a lot of companies who are offering me a better way of building the HDFC software. So I, let's say, go to a different company, for example, Accenture, and what Accenture says, hey, we'll build this entire stuff in an agile manner. So we follow best practices. What agile would do is HDFC guys have to give a initial set of requirement to Accenture, based on which Accenture guys will frame the requirement analysis. Okay, they will do the requirement analysis and they'll form a design. They'll start working. They'll develop that. They'll test it. They'll also deploy it and give it to Accenture. In this entire setup, while this was happening in, let's say, 6 months, in the fourth month, if Accenture got a different idea, Accenture still has the option or the flexibility to submit it to, let's say, HDFC has that option to submit it to Accenture, that, hey, these are my new set of requirements, or changed set of requirements, or updated set of requirements. This requirement, when pushed to the Accenture team, they push it to something called as a backlog. Now, from here onwards, your terminologies of Agile start. So the first thing that you need to know is backlog. Okay. So they push it to the backlog, and then they say, right now we are working on something, but we would prioritize it as soon as we are done with whatever was promised. So next, Accenture has work in pipeline. And while Accenture starts building the second set of requirements, the first set of requirements are already being used by HDFC employees. And at the same time, when you use, you also start raising issues and bugs, which Accenture has a dedicated team to fix. So are you getting it? The first thing is, now your requirements are no more outdated because you need not wait for longer periods of 1, 2, or 3 years to get the first look. First thing. Second thing is, your downtime is necessarily reduced because again, now Accenture is already using the first set of application while the second set of application is being built. And with the help of microservices, the monolith constraint is also removed. Now Accenture has given more flexibility because of Agile to HDFC Bank, wherein they can submit new demands on the fly and can expect it to be implemented as soon as possible and need not wait for years. There's more transparency because while HDFC Bank rolls out the first set of payment for your Accenture, they would already have seen something that is being done, right? Otherwise, you pay somebody, let's say 10 lakh rupees, and they would say, hey, I'll show you the minimum viable product also after 6 months. So that's a bit difficult, right? Instead, what happens is every 15 days or 21 days, you get to see something, right? Which also convinces you as a customer to roll out the payments. And it's a win-win for both of them. On top of this, because the customer already starts using the application even before it is completely developed, all sorts of quality issues are also more likely to be resolved. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now it makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's quickly look at the terminologies. This is anyway a quick session, so I would not drag it much. And I think now fundamentally you should know what all of this is. So Agile in general is more about flexibility, and there are multiple frameworks of Agile, okay? There are multiple frameworks of Agile. So Agile has got its own manifesto, which is somewhat theoretical, so I would not go into that. But yeah, you should know there are multiple frameworks for Agile. The first framework, and which we would also follow at SwipeGen, is Scrum. The other one's called Lean, and the third one is called Kanban. And like that, guys, there are many kinds of frameworks which are proposed as a part of Agile setup or Agile practice. Okay, so any organization which aims at practicing Agile, they can follow any of these frameworks. Now, I don't think it's very important for you to know right now what's the difference, but I'll just quickly tell you. Scrum is basically a more structured way. Kanban is a very loose way of doing things or practicing agile, and lean falls somewhere in the middle, wherein you are stringent with few things and you are flexible with few things. So uh, usually Scrum and lean are practiced. Kanban is usually for very small organizations or kind of people who are beginning. So let's first start looking at how this entire setup works. So let's say a requirement comes, and I would also, from here onwards, let me directly go to the place where you would be actually doing stuff so that you get proper practical information as well. See, what is happening here is I have this entire thing is called Azure DevOps, which is, let's say, an offering from Microsoft, which allows organizations big as Philips and Microsoft and as small as SwipeGen, right, to structure everything and manage their smooth operations, tracking their projects, their progress, their people, and everything. Okay. So I've created right now, let's say, the organization, I've put SwipeGen Agile, and we've got multiple boards. Now, B2B is something which should not concern you much. Let's go into SwipeGen B2C, which is our project. So you will see, as you click, you will see a lot of options up here. see overview, etc. This just gives you some basic overview, how many projects, etc. As we start working, you will see the dashboards, etc. getting updated. Wiki is something where you can just write some information. Let's say today you are building SwipeGen website, right? Tomorrow I might ask you to write some wikis on how you've developed it, so that when I onboard other developers after you, they can come read these wikis and they come to know how to develop it. Now, repos you already know. Pipelines is something which I would be explaining you later. This entire thing is not a part of Agile. What is part of the Agile is the boards. So let's take a deeper look here. And in the boards, the first thing that you see is work item. Okay. So what is a work item? A work item is basically a placeholder on how do you organize your task. So the hierarchy is you have a epic. Okay. The highest level of work, the most broad one is called epic. Within epic, you have features. Within features, you have user stories. Within user stories, you have tasks. And sometimes you can also have bugs, or sometimes you can also have issues within your user stories. In some setup, bugs come somewhere here. Let's say here, parallel to user stories. Sometimes they come all together as a part of different features. Sometimes they come as a part of user story. But for now, what you should understand is what is an epic. So let's go and I'll explain you what an epic is. So let me go to backlog. And before that, what is a backlog? Backlog is basically all the items that you want to build. Let's say you want to build SwipeGen website. So the first thing that you do is you create a backlog, as in what are the upcoming tasks that you would build and you would encounter. Okay. So those things are called backlogs. Now within backlogs, you create work items. It could be any work item. Usually, because the highest level is epic, so we go with an epic. So let's look at how our backlog looks right now. Our backlog right now has one epic. And what's the epic? It's completing the entire SwipeGen website, okay, for B2C, basically. So within my project, the first thing that I have is an epic, which aims at completing the entire website. Now, within epic, as I said, there are features. So and before I go to features, please know how do you perform an estimation? Or okay, let me go to estimation later. First thing is, yes, within Epic you have features. Now one feature is, let's say, building the UI UX. Another feature is building the website core code. The third one is looking at the platform and operations. So what I've done here, I've assigned this user story, let's say, to one person, this one to, and within these features you have user stories. So within web development, you have first building the initial web pages, then designing the flow, then you have the course catalog updation, etc. Similarly, for platform and operations, I have to set up the process. So now you can see this clear hierarchy of Epic. Within Epic, you have features. Within features, you have user stories. And within user stories, you can create your own tasks. Now, let's say a new work came and I have planned it for 6 months. So the first thing that I do is I will try to do a t-shirt sizing for my feature or Epic. So when you estimate your bigger chunk, right? A big task, let's say a big project, when you estimate, you basically t-shirt size it. Okay, it's called t-shirt sizing. So let's say I assume that, okay, this entire thing is going to take me 3 months, which is roughly around, let's say, 12 weeks. Okay. So I have already sized my entire thing into 3 months, for example. Now, this I have done for my feature or my epic, usually for the epic, but sometimes for features as well. Now what I do is I work in phases, okay? Phases of 15 days or 21 days each, okay? Phases, or you can also call it sprints. What are these sprints? Sprints are basically 15 days or 21 days time period wherein you pick user stories or features from the backlog, assign it to relevant people, and ask them to finish it within the sprint. Okay. So let's say in the next 15 days, somebody is available for 10 days. Okay. For work, because considering removing the weekends. So what you do is you estimate, okay, you estimate the user story in terms of story points. How you estimated your feature in terms of t-shirt size, you estimate the user story in terms of story points. One user story or one story point can have different definition. In some companies, it is 8 hours of work is one story point. In some, it is 6 hours of work as one story point. That depends on your organization. So when you, let's say now, if you are available for 10 days, then the maximum amount of user stories that you can get is worth how much? 10 story points, because you're available only for 10 days in a single sprint. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So it's as simple as that. You pick a user story from the backlog, assign it to developers, we estimate it, then give it to developers, the developers work on it, and then once the user story is completed, we just mark it closed and we pick up the next user story. This is the complete way of working. Now there are some key people in an agile side. The first key person is product owner. The product owner is somebody whose role I am playing right now. Who's doing what? Who's creating a healthier backlog, that means sufficient for work for the upcoming sprints, so that everybody who's working has sufficient amount of work. And he also explains the user stories to the people, right, to the developers. So the first person is the product owner. The second person is the scrum master. The job of a scrum master is to conduct the following ceremonies. The first ceremony is called daily scrum, which is usually a 15 to 30 minutes daily call where all the developers come and give updates. What are the updates you give? You give three kinds of updates. What you did yesterday, what are you planning to do today, and are you stuck somewhere? Do you have a dependency? So the first ritual that happens is like a meeting is daily scrum, which we will be conducting every day from now on. The second thing is you first do a sprint planning. What is a sprint planning? In the beginning of on day one of the sprint, you plan how much amount of work has to be done in this sprint and who's gonna pick up what. Pick which user story. This is sprint planning, usually 1 to 2 hours call. The third thing is called backlog refinement. If a new work has come, which we want to do in upcoming sprints, we have to make sure that we define and document and write down every requirement in the user story properly and create a healthier backlog. So all the newly incoming items that have come, we have to refine it, discuss it, and groom it in a way that as soon as the next sprint planning day comes, you guys can pick it up. The fourth thing that usually happens is retrospectives. This also happens once a sprint, and this is basically for what? This is basically for seeing that if I picked something for the last sprint, then were we able to accomplish our sprint goal? Let's say we picked 10 user stories together, Mayur and Shashank and Shirish. All three of them have picked 10 user stories, and we were able to achieve only 4 of them. What happened to the 6 user stories which we could not accomplish? What what can we do to make it better? Right, how do we make sure that people are not stuck with dependencies and things move properly? So these are the rituals that a scrum master has to conduct. Anywhere, if you are stuck, you can always reach out to your scrum master who would help you resolve the dependencies. And the third person obviously are the developers in this entire team. So a team is usually of 5 to 8 people, where you have one product owner who may or may not join the call always, but a scrum master and the developers, it is compulsory to join the calls. And these all four rituals are the bare minimum that has to happen in a agile setup, right? So every 15 days, now let's get back. Let's go to sprints. So this right now is sprint one, as you would see, which started on 26th August and will end on September 6th. Where what did I do? I just assigned a couple of user stories. This one is in the name of Ayushi, where she has a task already. This one is in the name of Shirish. He was not available, so he could not pick it up. Then this one was in the name of Pranav. He did not have any task this year, this sprint, so on and so forth. You can put a filter and go to, let's say, assign to Shirish, for example. So Shirish can see his user stories. Start creating your task, start doing it every day, update, and you can just mark this as active. Once your user story is completed, you can mark it as closed. You are not supposed to remove any user story. Okay. If and this is basically just it. There's not much. There's something called capacity, where we discuss how many hours you're working per day and how many days you are available, if you have any leaves, etc. So everything is planned properly and then executed. And when you go to backlogs, you will see some user stories which are still new. They are not active and they are not assigned to anyone. So in the next sprint planning, right, in the next sprint planning, we can allocate it to somebody else. There's something called as spillover. Now, what is a spillover? A spillover is basically when you miss accomplishing your user story allocated to you in that sprint, then it gets spilled over to the next. I just want to keep it very crisp, and this is what Agile is all about. These are the keywords. We can anyway have a discussion each time we meet in the Scrum, etc. We have around 4 minutes. So, yeah, questions, please. How much did you understand?
Yes, I got most of the part because the same thing was actually used by our company as well. Like it's kind of similar, so I thought I got it.
Exactly, great. And see, one more thing is people or organizations follow their own way of agile. It's super flexible. Okay. So some companies do it in a different way, some companies do it in a different way, right? Somebody usually conducts the last sprint, let's say the last scrum itself as retro. Somebody does not conduct backlog refinement at all. So somebody does, and there's something called estimation. So some people estimate during the sprint planning. Some people have a different call altogether for estimation. So there are a lot of things, but it's super flexible. Okay, left to you guys. But yeah, all you have to do is just keep updating your board, keep looking at it, and within each user story or within each task, there are a lot of things. Like let's say in this user story, there are things documented. Okay, if you look at this user story, for example, this user story has a lot of information, right? What needs to be done, what does not need to be done, so that when Ayushi opens, she knows that this is what has to be done. She can add her comments, you can mention people, do everything that is needed. The story points is for now empty because we've not done estimation. Okay, so on and so forth. Please explore more and come up with more questions. Shirish, you have anything to ask?
No, sir. I got the overview, although it was very new to me, but I got the overview, sir. So it's good now.
Cool. So now you understand that why it's very important, right? You are tracking people's leaves, you know their availability, you can plan deliverables better, right? As a product owner, let's say I have somebody who's above me. I have to update them, right? That okay, this next 15 days my developers are not available. We cannot, do a lot of work. There are holidays and everything, right? You plan better, you estimate better, you have a lot of transparency between you and the client, and things are pretty smooth. You can go back to 10 sprints and then see, hey, what was done that time, why we couldn't accomplish, if somebody implemented it in a way, how did they implement it, right? So everything is documented. Yes.
Right, sir.
Cool. Anyway, we'll have detailed connects from now onward. So once you see the invites in your calendar for daily scrum, then there's no escape, you have to join. And Shirish, that's why I said, because Scrum is gonna happen daily. So please don't think you commit something today to me, you'll do it tomorrow, because now it's a 15 days sprint that we are gonna work, right? So we'll have good amount of work picked up and then we'll try to deliver it.
Right, sir.
Cool. So anyway, enjoy your vacation, Shirish, and I think Mayur, he has a lot on his plate, I know. So
Yes.
okay. Fine, then we'll connect soon, probably tomorrow or day after. We are gonna kickstart. We'll see. Okay.
Right,
Yes.
sir.
Thanks then. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, sir.
Good night.